Hello everyone and welcome to Paris and to the WNE. My name is Anne-Charlotte Dagon and I will be hosting this roundtable chaired by ASSYSTEM on how to rethink the nuclear industry so that it can contribute to a low-carbon society. The session will be held in English and French, so for those of you who need, we have translation set right at the entrance of the room. You will be able to ask all of your questions at the end of the panel by sending them to the number you see on the screen. Let's jump right into it and discuss how we need to reinvent the nuclear sector to contribute to the fight against climate change. So, joining us today on our panel, we have our chair, Dominique Louis, founding chairman of ASSYSTEM, Sophie Lemaire, vice president for France, UK, Belgium, and South Africa from Westinghouse. We have Mr. Xavier Sa, chief executive in charge of engineering management and new nuclear projects from EDF, Mr. Bohdan Zvonek, member of the boards of directors and chief nuclear officer from ČEZ, and Mr. Boris Arsiv, global business development deputy director from Rosatom. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope the mic is okay. No? Can we have another mic, maybe? Is this better? Yeah, sorry about that. So, thank you very much for being with us and welcome to this panel. First thing first, let me give the floor to our chair, Dominique Louis, for a short introduction. Dominique?
Merci Anne-Charlotte, mesdames et messieurs.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The 2nd of September 2002, in Johannesburg, the President of the French Republic, Jacques Chirac, at the time, during Earth Summit, said the following thing: the house is on fire and we're watching the other way. We are almost 20 years later today, and the fire hasn't gone out. No, the fire is still blazing. In practically 20 years, the consumption of electricity at planetary level has doubled. CO2 emissions due to electricity generation has doubled. And the promises that were made as far as energy transition was concerned with renewable energies were not fulfilled, because people said we'll be able to store electricity, and we know today, the short, medium term, there's no technical solutions for storage that would be sufficient at an economic price. So the house is still on fire, and we're in an emergency situation. The only energy that can produce electricity effectively, in sufficient quantity, and with low carbon output is nuclear energy. Now, of course, the deployment of nuclear energy requires a great deal of rigor, because all of these technologies are complex. It's more complex than wind farms, for example. And France showed in the 1980s that it was possible to build a system of electricity generation totally decarbonized based on nuclear power generation. So why not do this today? Because if we want nuclear plants to be efficient at planetary level, it has to be a sufficiently high proportion of the energy mix. That means many nuclear projects in the world. The objective of this meeting is to understand what are the conditions that we need to bring together so that we can deploy effectively nuclear energy at the planetary level in the decades to come.
We have a first question for you, Xavier. When we talk about reinventing the nuclear industry, what do we actually mean by reinventing, according to you?
Beaucoup de questions, donc je vais faire.
A lot of questions. Thank you for your invitation, Dominique and ASSYSTEM, for this panel discussion. I'm delighted to be here. Indeed, we have considerable responsibility on our shoulders in the nuclear industry. Dominique Louise said this, that we know that there's an urgency and we know the solutions, and there's a lot of hesitation. We were asking questions, what are the best solutions? And after decades of 2010, the awareness has developed. Now we have to take action, and all the commitments the countries have taken at the different COP summit meetings have to be fulfilled. There is a real trend towards deciding to take action, and there's a renewal of nuclear industry, because many countries are wondering about the need for energy security. And this means that we have to shoulder this responsibility. This is a great responsibility for us in the nuclear industry. There are three things we must bear in mind. There are many other things, of course, but I'm going to concentrate on three. First, we have to be at an industrial level. People said, oh, nuclear third generation is much more expensive than second generation. Now, there are some structural reasons for extra cost. There's more safety systems and more complex designs. But there is another reason that in the 1970s and 80s we built second-generation reactors in dozens, and in 2020, the third generation, we're building them one by one or sometimes two by two. So there's less of a critical mass. Therefore, it is fundamental to come back to greater production, more industrial processed, and so that the industry knows that it has a possibility to fill in their order books, and we have to give visibility to all the players in the industry. The second thing is innovation. We are in a sector, and the public is not sufficiently aware about this, that innovates a great deal in all areas. And we've innovated in terms of organization of our projects, management of the complexity of the projects, also the technical solutions that we can deploy, and ability to accelerate the development of nuclear industry. And there are many innovative characteristics or innovative initiatives can help us in the production, manufacturing of components, obtaining the licenses, and also dialoguing, exchanging and being in dialogue with the regulatory bodies. And then there's international cooperation. Each country, each company has its challenges to address. But you have to remember one thing. Nuclear today, I remember exactly, but it's 10% of global electricity generation. Now we know that is a lever for decarbonizing electricity, and electricity is the only way of decarbonizing the economies. So the question is, do we want to remain an industry that is only 10% of generation of energy, or can we be at 30 or 40% of an electricity mix which will be much more prevalent in the future? And this can be addressed through innovation and an industrial ramping up. But we need international cooperation. Now, I think it's absolutely indispensable. I'll just give you one more figure. If we look at the countries that are already producing nuclear energy or have a roadmap for the next 10 years, countries that are on board, there are 3,000 fossil fuel plants to be replaced between now and 2050, because they'll come to the end of their life cycle, but also they're not compatible with the commitments that have been made in climate change. So 3,000 plants between 300 and 500 megawatts each. So we're going to also have renewable energies, and the market for nuclear energy is huge. So cooperation is just as important as necessary trust.
National collaboration is key to develop nuclear. Sophie, I know it's very important for Westinghouse as well.
Oui, merci Anne-Charlotte.
Yes, thank you very much, Anne-Charlotte. And I'd like to react to what Xavier said. International collaboration in our industry is essential. It's part of DNA of Westinghouse that has very much developed technology and deployed it throughout the world through licenses, by deploying the design of the EPR reactors. It's one of the modes of cooperation. Now, a project for a new plant is part of an ecosystem, or has to be part of an ecosystem. And we have to adapt to this ecosystem and work at a local level with the companies, but we won't be able to deploy a nuclear industry that is strong in each country to be able to build new plants in each country that want to build them. So we have or the industry has to group together, set up partnerships and be able to work together. And in Europe there's a fundamental challenge, and that's pretty clear. We're looking towards Eastern Europe, but not only, there are many projects in England, UK and France. That's good news recently. All this is going to require international cooperation, very close cooperation, and the capacity to bring together multicultural teams for major projects. We had the opportunity this year, and I would like to thank Xavier's teams for Flamanville 3 for the repair work or refurbishment work. We had 300 people working on the project, just under 200 on site. French teams, American teams, Swedish teams, German teams, British team, Belgians and Spanish teams, to mention only some of them. And what was really striking is that all these people worked together with the same objective, with the EDF teams, and it was a successful enterprise. So it's possible, it's just a question of deciding.
Cooperation, I guess, from a Rosatom point of view?
Thank you. You can see the example of cooperation. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank ASSYSTEM for having me here. It's a big opportunity to be here and discuss with you this very important and extremely important topic as cooperation. And why we do it? My colleagues mentioned that the world changed and changed the principles and maybe the main targets for the population. The population wants to increase their quality of life. And what is it? Nuclear energy and other resources. First of all, it's a comfortable atmosphere, comfortable life for all people everywhere. And what we are going to do right now, and we do it, it's developing of our cooperation, collecting the different technologies, collecting the different principles, unite our efforts in some different projects, because now we are not the field of competition. I think with the field of cooperation. And let me give you, for instance, our 2018 event, Atom Expo. It was the international event for nuclear industry, where the international committee decided, named this event Global Partnership Joint Success. It means we understood that only together we can reach the success and meet our goals. And by the way, a few digits for you. On this event, we got more than 4,000 delegates from 68 countries. It was a record. It means that the principles of cooperation, the idea of cooperation is very useful and very necessary today for our world. And by the way, we celebrate 50 years of cooperation in nuclear sphere with France. In 1971 was signed the first contract, and it's a great event. 50 years of cooperation. Plus we have the cooperation in R&D, and we know the thermonuclear international reactor, ITER, where, if my memory doesn't fail me, 27 countries. Yes? Who knows? Who knows how many countries in the international thermonuclear reactor? Okay, 27, trust me. And the same project, for example, we have now in Russia, the neutron, fast neutron reactor, the project MBIR, where we invite all participants, different countries, scientists, and people involved in the nuclear industry to investigate the new principles, the new technologies of this. That is why cooperation, I think it's the necessity today. It's not like the way how to do our business, because our business for people. People's request, the comfortable life. Our nuclear technologies can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dominique, ASSYSTEM being
Alors, en tant que d'acteur indépendant,
je dirais que le business model d'ASSYSTEM,
Well, the business model is cooperation because our activity is to be able to work on projects and new nuclear facilities regardless of technologies. It's more a matter of security, safety management, and therefore as soon as we work with many different technologies in different countries, we will develop our expertise and it will be a virtuous circle, expertise for our customers. So we're embracing that virtuous circle and it has been created 40 years ago at ASSYSTEM.
It's international cooperation without discussing international regulation as well. Mr. Zwonek, do you feel there is today a lack of standardization, and do you see that as a blocking point for countries willing to develop nuclear energy?
Well, I wouldn't say not blocking point, but definitely it's the issue, because I suppose all of us came across the clash of codes, because as we cooperate with each other, then we face the issue that, okay, we are using national codes, then there are ASME codes, then there are Russian codes, and IEEE codes, and the other codes. And to prove any modification and any step to regulator means that we have to transform it somehow into national language of national regulators. So definitely standardization is the issue, and it would help a lot. I like Xavier's highlight regarding innovation. So let's find new ways, new opportunities, find how not to compete, but to cooperate to be more effective, even if this field, because we are losing a lot of time and money to prove that we are compliant. And colleagues highlighted cooperation, so we want to share supply chain. There are a number of owners groups. There is R&D and EPRI, for example. So it's about using some joint outputs of research and industry, and it's about cooperation and also standardization. Especially if we are focusing on SMRs, there is a huge opportunity to create some joint approach, standard licensing process to allow us to move more effective ahead, and not to lose the time and not to lose the money. And one specific item which is relevant for current fleets might be commercial grade dedication or commercial grade items, how to use something which the world knows and uses for aircraft industry and the other industries. And we are losing money buying the same stuff for not euros in case of aircraft and the other industries, but for hundreds, buying the same only equipped by nuclear papers. So there are a number of ways how to be more effective and efficient.
Xavier, do you want to react to that on standardization?
Oui, je pense que c'est une question tout à fait.
Yes, it is absolutely essential. Perhaps a couple of words on SMRs, small modular reactors, just to continue with what has just been expressed by Bowden. Well, on the nuclear market, people are really interested in SMRs. What we say is that all good ideas are good to share, and SMRs should not see as a competitor for big new reactors, but it could be a supplement. It could be interesting to replace fossil plants in specific systems or in remote places, you know. So, but the SMR, a building brick, is really interesting. So there is this interesting notion with smaller reactors. It's quite interesting. And there is another side to the coin. The principle of SMRs is to make scales economies with a number, because you can't have scale economies with the power. So it is not a matter of a tenth, but hundreds that will be identical. So this SMR concept works only if SMRs can be approved of identically, exactly, not nearly identical, because that's a way to waste million euros, but that will be validated systematically and identically by several safety authorities. So we would thought that we would end up with the best of all safety entity standards, and that would not be reachable and that would be very difficult. But I think quite the opposite. We have to find a way to ensure that the safety authorities will cooperate so that on the continental scales we will have the same systems of certifications and validations. So we have a big challenge to live up to. We should not be theoretical, but to focus on tangible models, the design, to see what will be the best model to meet the international requirements. So we have to be pragmatic, development-wise, so that we can come up with reactors that will be validated on a continent or in the world. And remember that the SMR is extremely sexy, really interesting, but in fact, it is the very concept that implies that countries should cooperate, that safety authorities should cooperate.
Industry means creating new technologies. SMR is of course one of them. Sophie, how do you envision nuclear technical innovation, I would say, for the decades to come? Is the nuclear we know today will be the same in the decades to come, or will it be different?
Well, of course, it will be different. We've heard with Xavier that we would step up to 30%, so that's a very good news, and I do back up the notion. Now, seriously, the technology, of course, evolves very rapidly because many players are part of major innovation programs for many different reasons. There is something that is absolutely essential to me when we talk about the design and commissioning of reactors. We talk about extending building times or excessive costs. So we have to change the trend here. And one of the ways to get there is perhaps to start and think about how simplifying our designs, still abiding by safety rules, obviously, but it is something we must bear in mind constantly. Simpler design, it implies to work on all the different life stages of the reactor, thinking about a modular design, also thinking about operations to have more simpler systems. As we try to come up with the best system for a reactor, make it competitive, making sure that there are simple maintenance operations and decommissioning as well. We have to think earlier on about how easy a reactor must be, easy to dismantle, to decommission. So we have to control the overall chain just to make it all much more simpler. So that's a major challenge that will make us all competitive. We'll be able to control lead times as we design new reactors. Then it is also a matter of quality. Xavier will come back to this with the Excel plan, EDF Excel plan. It is a leader in this field just to try to improve our quality and to be able to keep our constructions under control. And then in terms of innovations, we talk about SMRs, right? There's a new way to think about in terms of scales. For years, we've been part of a big is beautiful approach. We wanted to go bigger and be competitive. Now it's quite the opposite. SMR is a good example with microreactors as well, with different types of uses for non-electrified, non-powered areas for specific uses. So that's a way to revamp technologies and to look at technologies with a new eye, so to speak. Always bearing in mind that there's a need for a simplification to be able to keep our costs, lead time under control, to reduce them, and to promote energy.
Innovation, do you think, will be necessary to foster the development of nuclear worldwide in the future? Yeah, you were mentioning hydrogen, closing the fuel cycle. What kind of technical innovation do you see coming to the market?
Thank you. My colleagues once again mentioned, I would say, the most modern technologies now and the most, how to say, requireable technologies as SMR. And let me share with you our experience in this area. As you know, We have this kind of technologies, but first of all for transportation in our icebreakers fleet, where we used this technology last decades, I mean 50 years, maybe a little bit more. And now we launch the first floating NPP, as you know, and now it's under operation and very successful on the north part of Russia, where our population have sustainable energy for light, for heat, and this is, I would say, very nice example or pilot project for next development. Now we continue to develop our small reactors technologies based on these previous transportation reactors and that we use on the floating NPP, and we preparing projects for land-based small reactors, SMR, and I think in the future it will be really the Syria of technologies. But now I'm absolutely agree. Now it's maybe a little bit expensive compared with the existing high power units. But at the same time, we haven't chance not to do it. Why? Because in the different areas, in the different relief of different territories, where you can't use a big amount, big capacity nuclear power plant to share and create a special mix of energy, or sometimes instead of existing coal and influencing on to the ecology sources of energy, I think it's very important technology, and this is the area of development area, once again, area of cooperation between different companies, with different customers, consumers, and other moments. And the other part of new technologies, it's a closed fuel cycle. Closed fuel cycle, it's a very important thing to save the natural resources. For example, you know, in Russia we have the fast neutron reactors and power plant under commercial operation, which used two reactors, being 600 megawatts and being 800 megawatts. And we're still developing these technologies, increasing the efficiency, increasing the capacity, and I think it's maybe the most progressive area of technology and innovation. And plus, don't forget about the non-energy technologies for life. For example, irradiation treatment, cold pasteurization. It's very important for agricultural sector. Plus, nuclear medicine, a huge request from the population to have the, first of all, enough opportunity for nuclear medicine, and plus for treatment and earlier diagnosis. That it's like examples and our way of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaking of innovation, Xavier, maybe could you develop a bit on the impact of digital technologies to make nuclear today and tomorrow more efficient?
Oui, c'est sûr que je pense que
Certainly, I believe all the digital solutions today offer almost unlimited possibilities for progress in our nuclear projects. For example, we've have engineering systems and data-centric systems and digital tools are going to enable us to really ensure that we have maximum security and safety, and to be able to manage very complex systems, the management of the project, management of the complexity of projects with the different models, digital modeling systems going to help us. And we have an acceleration of efficiency and cooperation of supply chain. There are many interfaces currently, and when you manufacture a steam generator, we spend a huge amount of time working on checks and controls systems, and we'll be able to accelerate things and use blockchains that are going to certify much more effectively all the control points. So we have an acceleration of efficiency of supply chain whilst progressing in terms of quality and cooperation. And one last point, and we're going to deliver natively plants, reactors with their duplicates, and to be able to plug in simulation tools, simulate the aging of the installation, simulate maintenance, simulate the best placing or organizing, scheduling of maintenance, so as to enable continuous operation. We have a huge field in which we're going to be able to increase quality and reduce time, reduce the time to carry out operations.
Mentioned yet is human resources, of course, how to gather the skills, how to create local supply chains if nuclear is to be developed in more and more countries, some of them newcomers. Mr. Zvonek, how to manage and address this challenge of skills and local supply chains?
D'avoir un supply chain qui est concurrentiel et de pouvoir le faire pays par pays, peu importe si les opérateurs sont des nouveaux venus. On ne peut pas tout faire sur la commande et on doit pouvoir répondre aux besoins d'urgence et aux besoins au quotidien. Et il va falloir constamment chercher un équilibre entre chercher les capacités en interne et de pouvoir sous-traiter ou travailler avec des partenaires extérieurs. Alors il faudra une présence locale, bien entendu, même s'il y a des sociétés étrangères, il faut maintenir une main-d'œuvre dans les pays mêmes qui sont à même de répondre aux demandes nouvelles qui vont survenir. Et il s'agit de garder suffisamment de compétences et de capital de connaissances afin de pouvoir faire les commandes et de pouvoir vérifier ce qu'on nous livre, s'assurer de la qualité, de la conformité de ce qu'on nous livre. Il faut pouvoir donner du travail aux sociétés, mais également pouvoir travailler en partenariat et pouvoir développer la coopération au long terme. Et comment également attirer des jeunes générations et comment être à même d'avoir les ressources humaines compétentes et avec la jeune génération, comment les attirer et pouvoir leur offrir des emplois qui les intéressent, qui les motivent et pour qu'ils restent.
Of public acceptance if nuclear is to develop a lot across the planet. Sophie, do you feel this is still a challenge, and if so, how to address it?
Alors, de façon évidente,
Now, obviously, the discussion concerning climate change has brought us back to this question of nuclear energy coming to the forefront. And we're in a time where there's a great deal of enthusiasm, and we have to be able to address this challenge. And it's really important to be able to communicate as an industry on our capacity to reinvent our industry. Now, of course, we have to remain humble. The challenges that we had to address are not going to disappear from one day to the next. It's going to be a little bit more complicated than one might expect. But we are all working on innovative systems. I talked a lot about simplification, capacity to prove that we are in full control of our projects. this will have a great impact on the acceptance of the nuclear industry by the public at large. Now, today, the planets are better aligned than they were 5 years ago when it comes to the future of the industry. I like what Boris was saying about the other applications for nuclear. We don't talk about enough. We generally talk about energy. Now, the nuclear in a medical sector is very important as well, and we are working with EDF for the production of cobalt in reactors. These are things that are also that need to be promoted, need to be communicated more about. It's something we should talk about more often.
Mr. Asif, on public acceptance, do you want to add anything?
I absolutely agree about the so important thing, speaking about public acceptance, and not only just in case of talking about energy. That is why maybe non-energy projects, speaking about nuclear technologies, could be more understandable examples for population, because X-rays, now it's everywhere. That I mentioned about nuclear medicine, of course it's about health, and it's important for everybody, absolutely. It means that nuclear technology is very useful for population, very useful for humanity. That is why we have to find the best way how to demonstrate it. Maybe organize some additional, informational centers. For example, we do it in the different regions with newcomer countries in our country. And for instance, the medium level of public acceptance in my country, 75%. For example, in Novovoronezh region, where the Generation 3 new absolutely reactor, the public acceptance 90%. It means if people know about technology, it's not the reason to create some additional myths and fairy tales about nuclear. It means they knew absolutely clear what is it, what is the useful moment. And plus for that, I think it's very important to show and declare our attitude, responsible attitude for waste management. Not only just the radiation we can and we control the radiation, about waste management. And now this is a very huge area, once again, for cooperation, for education for different people, to show them all the benefits from nuclear technologies. First of all, technologies where energy, some kind of solutions in our common life, in specific areas like agriculture, medicine, and so on. And that is why, let me underline maybe the third time, that this area of cooperation is very important, and this is a huge work for us, for all of us. It's not a competitive, it's not sorry for my bad English, it's not a field of competition. It's absolutely 100% area of cooperation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zvonek, at the time where you planning to develop nuclear nationally, how do you deal with public acceptance?
Definitely public acceptance is the must. It's something vital on the beginning, and without public acceptance it would be very difficult to do any other steps. So if we start with current operation, we have to be able to prove that we are safe and reliable. We cannot fail. There is no space for any huge failure like we knew from Fukushima or Chernobyl or even similar like this. We have to communicate very openly. We have to be trusted. We have to be heard. And thanks for the hint. We have to educate public, educate our stakeholders to understand us and to prove that nuclear is the good way, and to deny the myths and some misunderstandings. We have to be present at localities, being a good neighbor and a good partner for municipalities. It works very well. Again, thanks for the hint. And all of this is the long-term run. It provides no immediate results. It takes a long time to build the trust. But if you fail, you will lose a huge, not only sum of money, but you may lose everything. And let me give you one example. When I was much younger, I was discussing with one of German colleagues, and they told me, I envy you what you do, everything for public communication, explaining how it works, explaining all of safety issues, because we went to the top of nuclear business. We stopped communications because we were so self-aware and persuaded that we are on the top and will stay there, that it might not pay to us in the end. And it took only 7 years from this discussion to the decision that they will phase out nuclear.
Dominique, do you want to discuss public acceptance, maybe more specifically to France?
Alors, oui, je répondrai en...
Yes, I'd reply in two ways. People who live near a nuclear plant, and I live near a nuclear plant, are for nuclear energy. People who live far away are against nuclear energy, nuclear plants. People who live close to wind farms are against. People who live far away from wind farms are for wind farms. So that's interesting because there's been a change in attitude. What does it mean? Well, we have to be able to communicate effectively about the issues that people are concerned about. With what is happening with COVID, for example, today, everybody's understood that it's not cut and dried or black and white. And in nuclear energy, it's like with vaccines, there are pros and cons, but you mustn't let those who are against have a monopoly of the discussion when it comes to the negative aspects. And we have left in the past communication on nuclear energy, people who've said all sorts of things. I remember at the beginning of the Hague treatment plant, there were a number of rumors about leukemia in Normandy increasing in prevalence, but we realized that it was wrong because people who worked in nuclear plants were much more controlled by, had more checkups, medical checkups. Now, I think that in France today there is greater acceptance, and I think the French were shocked when the cost of electricity, nuclear electricity, was indexed on gas prices. I think this is going to change, in fact. All this comes into play, and I think that during a period where information is disseminated, one mustn't be afraid to talk about incidents or accidents, and I explain why an accident can be a positive, because it enables us to improve safety. I went to Fukushima because there are people say, yes, but Fukushima, but they have nothing to say because Fukushima, that's all they know. So we have to communicate effectively, and we must be proud of the nuclear industry. We're going to provide electricity and energy for the century. The reactor's going to build, they're going to be operating to the end of the century for our children, our grandchildren, and I'm convinced that the next century, I hope, we will be able to develop fusion technologies for the 22nd century.
I would like to save the last few minutes for questions from the audience. So do not hesitate to send them. You have the number and the link over there. Maybe we've received a few already. Yeah, we have one. So you've indicated that the nuclear sector is an innovating one. Do you have a few examples of innovation to share with us today? Anyone want to start?
Oui, on a évoqué le...
Well, yes, we talked about digital technologies. We could talk about additive manufacturing. We are now working on safety parts, working with 3D printers, what we call additive manufacturing, in order to reconcile extremely high level of qualities and good costs for limited edition parts. Even though we produce a lot of reactors, we're still dealing with limited number of parts. It is quite promising indeed. There's a lot of research, indeed, with the new building techniques in the civil engineering. We carry out research programs on materials. In fact, there are research programs in all fields. We could talk for hours, but we have to explain it. Dominique's quite right. We have to reach out to citizens just to explain what nuclear is about, the pros, the advantages of this, how we can mitigate as much as possible problems, and to tell people about our jobs and innovations. It's very important. People may feel that this profession, this sector hasn't changed. Of course it's wrong, but it is up to us to convey the right message. So we have to go and explain about nuclear innovation. That is definitely part of the industry.
Yeah, of course, please.
If I may add, the innovation, Xavier mentioned digitalization, so there is a huge move to paperless workflow of anything, including protocols and quality inspection methods. Who heard a couple of years before about Internet of Tools, about artificial intelligence. All of this is found at current nuclear facilities in use, and there are a number of new technologies, including 3D printing. So even if it's nuclear, there is huge space for innovation and use of very new technologies, as we know in different world.
Sophie?
Sophie, well, yes, I will agree with what has been said. In terms of important innovations, we worked in Westinger about passive safety. It is a major challenge for the years to come. That's a way to contribute to further acceptability. And this has led to a lot of innovations on specific systems that are used for several types of reactors. We didn't talk that much about the innovative reactor, molten salt reactors, or lead reactors. Every company working in this field also dedicate time to these innovations. But we could talk about it for hours. So go to our booth and discover all our innovations.
Concrete example, maybe in addition to the one you gave previously, Boris?
Speaking about innovations in the different industries, on the one hand, it's how to say, yes, it's a different industries, nuclear industry and then other industries. On another hand, I would say, what is it nuclear, or for example, nuclear power plant? Nuclear power plant is the product of different innovations from different industries. It's new materials, new technologies, digitalization, plus new metals, and once again, it's new methods of education, project management, how to construct in the budget and on time, of course. That is why, speaking about what we can involve from other industries, I would say everything. This is the area of cooperation, maybe not so on the top of our mind, but basically the cooperation around nuclear, and you can see it on our exhibition. All kinds of products for first of all. Or it was the second question?
No, actually, no? But it's a nice transition.
The previous, yeah. That is why speaking about innovation, nuclear is the top of different innovation from different industries. And this is the share of experience.
Thank you very much. We talked a lot about international collaboration. So could we envisage common examples of collaboration, common offer between EDF, Rosatom and Westinghouse for CHES on SMR? Question from the audience.
Definitely, why not? CHES will very welcome any offer which will make sense. So if it will be like this, and we are very open.
ASSYSTEM is missing.
Yeah, ASSYSTEM is missing.
So you will contribute.
Je pense bien sûr on peut imaginer
Yes, of course. We could think about a lot of ways to cooperate. There are several levels. It is a matter of model. Each of the three players here have their own reactor design, reactor model. So it means that here and there can be cooperations, of course, but there can be a lot of cooperation in terms of supply chains for one specific design. These things happen every day, and we have to further develop this. And it is, again, a question of standards and norms, so that our supply chains can be reconciled and efficient. I believe we will still have several models, for sure, several designs. That's one thing. But there must be a way with these existing models to increase cooperations in order to foster acceptability and foster capacities as well. It may be wishful thinking, but what we have to live up to is to be able to transform the industry. You know, nuclear is not a religion, it is a question of passion, and first of all, it is an industry, a global industry, a major player that can play a key role against climate change. So what lies ahead is absolutely huge. Therefore, everybody's capacities can be used.
Out of time, maybe a very short thought to conclude, Dominique.
Conclusion rapide, je crois que
Well, yes, says Dominique. About cooperation. Well, in this kind of arena, people like to say that they're willing to cooperate, but what we understand that it's part of our values. For big machineries, what matters is the time to market. So what Xavier just explained, being able to share components. And by the way, there's a good example, which is aeronautics. Planes are different, but parts and engines are similar. And for smaller machines as well, there are solutions off the shelf, but there's a need for prior standardizations. Otherwise, things cannot work because eventually products will be too expensive. So cooperation is definitely part of the value chains for our industry.
Please join me in thanking the great speakers for their insight today. Thank you very much for attending.